Hello artists, it's Mrs. Werfel, and today we're going to make one of our mini books about shape. As you know, we fold the paper and fold it in half, fold these in half again, open it back up, and you've probably already made a couple extra of these. Fold it in half this way and snip along the center fold. That will allow you to pop it open. You're going to have to force this sometimes to open up. And there's our book. And we'll zoom in a little bit. So today, the element of art that we're talking about is shape. All right, shape. Now I'll be keeping my book very simple. You will make yours more interesting by adding textures and details and color and decorate it. I want to save you time in this video and do mine a little more quickly than that. All right, so first of all, what is shape? All right, last week we talked about line. So if you take a line and you continue it in 1, 2, multiple directions, instead of just heading linearly, I'm defining a word by word, if you keep it going and then you connect that line to itself and make an enclosure, you create a shape. It is enclosed, and sometimes it's almost enclosed, but we'll talk about that as we go. So a shape is enclosed, and it's also 2D. Sometimes people say 2D and 3D, and they forget to say two-dimensional. Dimensional means that it can be measured. Okay, so you can measure a two-dimensional object in 2 directions. So I can measure this booklet this way, and I can also measure it this way. We use different words for these measurements, so height and width, or maybe length. You might be wondering, well, can't I measure it here also? This diagonal is a relationship between the width of this paper and the height of this paper. But the important thing is that it doesn't take up a thickness. It doesn't have depth. Depth is for the 3rd dimension, or is the 3rd dimension. So those are the 3-dimensional things. So here's an example of something that we would, as artists, consider 2-dimensional. It's flat, even though, yes, I could measure the depth of it. The depth is very, very, very small and thin compared to these measurements. So it's proportionally flat. Does that make sense? So we'd call this 2-dimensional for the purposes of art. All right, so 2-dimensional, so it can be measured in 2 dimensions. Or directions. Let's change that. Directions. Orientations. There's lots of words for that. All right, so that is kind of the basic definition of shape. I'm going to leave this page blank, and I'd like you to draw different kinds of shapes on there as you go. Let's flip to the next page. Oftentimes, shapes are divided into 2 categories, and I bet you already know these categories. One category are the shapes that are more mathematical, and for example, this one here that I already showed you, we call those I bet you know, geometric shapes, all right? The other ones, mathematical. All right, in fact, geometry is a subset of math. All right, so the other set are those that are more informed by nature, more natural. So that would be, say, for example, the shapes of these leaves, the petals of this orchid. All right, and do you know what we call natural shapes? You might have seen this word in the grocery store, or if you're a gardener. Organic. Organic means from nature. So things that would be all living things have organic shapes. So if you look at my hands, these can't really be described with simple geometries. There is some crossovers, so we'll look at examples. I will include at the end of the slideshow some very geometric forms that happen in nature that I'd like you to enjoy. All right, so geometric would include circles and squares. Maybe you can make your square more geometric than mine. Triangles and rectangles. Those would be some basic geometric shapes. And then in our organic category, we'd have things like clouds, all right? Or the great wave. Here comes my great wave again, right? Or we might see a leaf in nature. And you can see these irregular, curvilinear, sometimes it seems unstructured edges. Now, nature has a structure for everything. So things don't happen randomly in nature, but they may look more random to us until we study it more. All right, so these types of things, a tree maybe, lots of textures, variety. All right, so there's a tree. House. One thing I'd like to say about geometric is that these are very often found in man-made items. All right, so here's a timer, there's a square there, right? Anything that's rectilinear, made by man, is probably something that has geometric shapes in it. All right, let's talk about actual shapes and what we call negative shape. I'll be talking about this a lot when we're doing our drawing. Sometimes it's hard to draw a thing. In our minds, we think it's hard. For example, hands. A lot of people are intimidated by drawing hands, and sometimes it's helpful to actually draw the space in between. So you can draw the actual hand, like the fingers, you can draw those, or you can draw the shapes that you see around and between things. So here's an example of that in art. I'll do a simple shape. So I can draw a heart by drawing the heart, the actual. Now this is not a natural heart, right? Not a realistic heart. This is more of a geometric representation of a heart. There we go. So I can draw the heart, or I could do the space around the heart. So let's say I want to put it in a box here, right? So instead of drawing the heart itself, I'm actually drawing the background in this case, right? But it could be the space in between things. When describing trees, there's a little gap between one branch and another where you can see the sky through, and we call that sky holes. So when you're drawing things like trees, very often you'll see artists will draw the sky holes to help actually make that tree appear from the background by drawing the background. So there's an example of negative shape. Sometimes people call this positive, right? Positive shape. So positive and negative can be opposites of each other. So draw the thing or draw not the thing. Okay, so that's a basic introduction to shape, and it will come into play as we're talking about our different artworks. You'll see this repeated again and again in our references. When you get the shape of something accurate, then you will have more fidelity or more accuracy to the reference that you're drawing from. All right, boys and girls, we'll see you in the live session this week.